Welcome to the RotoRob.com Fantasy Football Weekly plus ATS Picks. Each week, your hosts Josh Johnson and Nick Wagner will give you the goods to help you win your fantasy football crown.
Free cash, homie. Talking about practice. Not a game. We talking about practice.
Playoffs? Don't talk about playoffs. You kidding me? Playoffs?
A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away.
Welcome to the RotoRob Fantasy Football Weekly podcast. I am Joshua Johnson. With me, as always, is Nick. Hail to the Redskins, Wagner. Nick, what is up, my friend?
Oh, not much. I took a nice little trip out to Seattle over the weekend, so I can officially report that not only did the fans not tear down the city in disgust over the Super Bowl, but they actually showed great sportsmanship, going so far as to congratulate the Patriots by hanging up Super Bowl MVP Tom Brady's number all over town.
You told me you were going to do that, and I didn't get it until the exact moment when you started telling it again. I get it now. The 12th man, yes. Sorry, I'm a little slow, had a bit of a hectic morning, but I get it. Very good. But anyway, I unfortunately want to announce to everybody this is actually going to be our last show with RotoRob. We have been summoned by the boys over at Dynasty Football Warehouse to take over resurrect their podcast, so to speak. So we'll get to more of that at the end of the show, but I just want to announce that and thank everybody here who has supported us throughout our couple of years here at RotoRob. Today's show, we have a couple more college bloggers. We have Jamie Plunkett from the FrogsOWar.com, which is a SB Nation website devoted to Texas Christian Horned Frogs Athletics, and we also have Matt Brown from LandGrantHolyland.com, which is another SB Nation site devoted to Ohio State Buckeyes athletics. So we're going to have those guys on and talk about a few prospects. We're also going to talk about Cleveland a bit here and there, of course, some more Ndamukong Suh talk. The best number 8 as well in NFL history, and Nick's going to rant, of course, to tell you that we are true fantasy football dorks. We've already started a mock draft. The Super Bowl is barely out of our thoughts, and we have a mock draft up that we're already working on. It's a slow email style draft, so we'll get you updated for that. Hey, and I think I'm on the dock, so I can actually make my pick, Nick. How about that? Is RG3 done in Cleveland? Well, I guess we'll have Nick take the floor there. Done in Cleveland, done in Washington. Sorry. And then we'll probably end a little bit on a sad note. But anyway, thank you for listening to the RotoRob Fantasy Football Weekly. Jamie's going to be out here in a couple minutes. But I just wanted to say a few things about the Cleveland Browns. Now, people have just been piling on them over the last couple weeks or so. You know, they're the worst organization in sports, in football by far. And, the Raiders and Jaguars are still in the NFL. But I also want to point out, the main reasons that they're talking about this is because of Manziel and Josh Gordon. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, Nick, but I think this team pretty much did way better last year without those two players. I mean, this team kind of just faded in the last couple of weeks. It's not like they were 2-14 or 3-16. We're talking about, I believe, a 7-9 ball club last year that was really in it until the last probably 2 or 3 weeks. So they're not. I mean, maybe Gordon's not going to play next year, and maybe Manziel's not the answer at quarterback, but it's not like this. They don't have talent that got them to what, it's like I would be happy if my Raiders were 7-9 last year. I'm sure you probably would have wished that on your Redskins, don't you think?
Definitely, and I agree with you. They did overachieve on the field. They were winning ugly, but they were still winning a lot more ball games than people gave them credit for, or than people expected them to. But I think you mentioned the Johnny Manziel and the Josh Gordon, but I think another reason that people are looking at the Browns is not a very good franchise right now is you have the scandal with the owner getting into some legal trouble before, and now you have the GM apparently was sending text messages down to the sideline during games last season, which is a violation of the rules. So, the problems stem from the players all the way up to the top in the organization. It's not just the players getting into trouble.
Yeah, it's true, but yeah, maybe I'm a big component of since I work kind of in the music industry since most of my adult life, that controversy sells records, whether it's Two Live Crew or the fact that Creedence Clearwater Revival never got along together, even though there was two brothers in that band. They put out like 40 singles in the span of like 3 or 4 years. So, maybe controversy is what my Oakland Raiders and your Washington Redskins need to get things going. So maybe somebody in Washington needs to get in trouble, Nick. What do you think?
Well, I think there's usually enough controversy surrounding RG3 to fill the controversy quota for any team.
Yes, very true, very true. But anyway, we have Jamie Plunkett on the phone. Again, Jamie is from FrogsOWar.com, an SB Nation website devoted to Texas Christian Horned Frogs athletics. Jamie, are you there?
I'm here. How are you guys doing?
Good. How are you, Jamie?
Doing pretty well.
Okay. Well, we of course have you on today to get us the lowdown on some of these prospects that your horned frogs. It is horned frogs, right? Horned.
Yeah,
frogs?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Horned frogs.
Yes. Probably one of the more underrated, better mascots out there, I guess I would say. But anyway, you want to just kind of fill us in on what you guys do over there at FrogsOWar.com.
Well, like you said, we're dedicated to TCU athletics. It was a lot of fun this year covering the football team, watching them go 12-1 and win the Peach Bowl. But that doesn't stop at football. We cover baseball, basketball, any other sport that TCU plays. We try to get as much info on it from the coaching staff, from other insiders, and report it to the people. So we're kind of that venue for everything TCU, for the TCU fan to come talk about sports related to the Horned Frogs. And that includes guys that are going to the draft that have been to the combine or not. A couple of TCU guys got snubbed this year, but we've got a good senior class coming off this football team that's ready to kind of come in and dominate the NFL.
Most definitely. And we had one of our draft gurus that we know, Jeff Lloyd, on the podcast about a month ago, and he would not stop talking about these guys that TCU has in the draft, and some of the guys that are going to be coming out for the next couple of years. So I said, man, I got to find myself a TCU blogger. So that's why you're on. So let's get going here. What do you think about this Paul Dawson character? Honestly, I sat down to watch film on all these guys that I sent you, and I started watching film on Paul, and I really didn't get much further because I was just really, really impressed. What do you think?
Well, the guy is an athletic freak. If you know anything about TCU defenses, you know that Gary Patterson builds them on the foundation of speed. So any defender that's coming out of TCU, he's going to have the foot speed to keep up in the NFL. And that Paul Dawson is not an exception there. He is absolutely incredibly fast for a linebacker. He's about 6'2", 230, flies to the ball, has incredible instincts. And despite being slightly undersized, I think his frame can handle a few more pounds, personally. But despite being undersized, he does shed blocks very well. He's incredibly capable of getting into the backfield, and he loves stopping the run. And so, when you get a guy like Paul Dawson on the football field, you know that you're going to get a guy that's fast and can get to the ball quickly, regardless of whether it's being thrown or run.
He's listed as an outside linebacker. When you watch the film, they kind of put him all over the place, whether, he's playing kind of center field in that nickel defense or what. Do you think he'll be just limited to outside linebacker? Because I feel he's just got that great range, right?
Well, he does. Every linebacker at TCU is expected to cover at least half the field because TCU runs the 4-2-5 defense. So when you're talking about linebackers, you know that there are only two out there. And so for Paul Dawson, and the same goes for his counterpart Marcus Mallett this year, they were asked to cover a lot of ground out on that defense. And so, regardless of whether he's inside or outside, I think Dawson has the ability to cover a lot of ground. As an outside linebacker, he's definitely capable of getting out into the flat, kind of dropping back into coverage and covering a tight end or a slot guy or anything like that. From the inside, again, he's a good run stopper, but he's also totally capable of falling back and kind of playing that center field that you mentioned.
Okay. Nick, any questions there about Dawson?
Well, I agree with you guys. As far as on the field, I love him. Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year, and I think he's going to be big enough at the NFL level. There's not a whole lot of teams that run strict power run games that his size would impede his success. So I think he'll be big enough. He's definitely got the speed. But one thing I kept seeing in scouting reports was the phrase character concerns, but I could never find any actual incidences of him getting in trouble. Do you know what those concerns might be?
Well, he went to apparently those kind of started in high school with Paul, and he didn't get along with coaches very well. He actually went to Trinity Valley Community College originally and transferred in as a junior to TCU. There were always rumors that he and Coach Patterson didn't always see eye to eye about certain things, but as far as incidents or specific incidents is concerned, we don't really know of anything that happened. A lot of that is it's kind of brewed up in the past 2 months since the back end of the TCU football season. But really, all we've seen as fans and as people that kind of cover the team is a guy that works really hard, a guy that knows where he's supposed to be on the field, and really one of the big leaders of that defense. So all of that, we don't really have anything to substantiate those rumors at this point.
Have you heard anything, or were any teams really in love with him? As far as where he's going to go into the first round, I would probably have to guess right now.
I've seen a lot of projections that have him in the back half of the first round. I think it was NFL.com, maybe it was not, but NFL.com or someone did a projection today that said he was one of the top 15 players in this draft. I do expect him to go in the first 2 rounds. I don't think he'll drop out of the second round, that's for sure. I don't know how much character concerns would play into that, even though there really isn't anything to substantiate those rumors. But I see him going, maybe somewhere from 25 to 31, somewhere in that range, the first round.
Yeah, I kind of likened him to some friends of mine on Twitter yesterday as almost like an Andre Jones type of player, where I know that's a baseball player, but he just the range, like I said earlier, he has a linebacker. It's just amazing. Now I asked some other people because I really just kind of wanted to be talked down on him, and I can't find it. But anyway, I was trying to figure out who. Somebody made a couple of great comparisons. Maybe I'll spot it out later when you're talking about somebody else. Well, let's move on. Chris Hackett. This is another guy that our buddy Jeff was really excited about. Free safety. What do you got on him for us?
Well, this guy has been one of the big leaders of the defense of the secondary for 3 years now. The kid has been a beast. In the 4-2-5, he's one of 3 safeties on the field, and he's been one of 2 besides Sam Carter, who we'll talk about in a little bit, who's really been underrated for the entirety of their collegiate career, in my opinion. Hackett is, I think, a legit size for the NFL for a free safety. He's got incredible speed. Again, like I said, TCU defense is all based on speed. He loves to stop the run, and he's underrated in coverage. The guy led TCU in interceptions this year with 7, including 1 in the Peach Bowl against Ole Miss. I think he was 3rd or 4th on the team in tackles. The guy flies to the ball, loves to hit you hard, will hit you hard. If you go back, all of this year's game film is on frogswar.com if you guys want to go back and watch those games. And if you just watch Hackett play, he's looking for an opportunity to light someone up. But he's not allowing himself to compromise his coverage to do that. He's just always on his toes, ready to hit someone really hard. And so I think when you talk about how his game translates to the NFL, what you're going to see is a guy who kind of comes in and is essentially a Roy Williams type of safety with better coverage skills.
Okay. Wow. I was going to ask you to compare him, but then you went there. The comparison I found for Dawson, my buddy Bill Carroll gave me was James Ferrier and Jamie Sharper, kind of a mix of those 2 for Dawson. But so Roy Williams, that's a pretty good comparison, but maybe just probably a harder hitter too, you think?
I don't know if he's a harder hitter than Roy Williams, but he does not mind getting his nose in there and mixing it up a little bit. I think he's a little bit more balanced of a player than Roy Williams was. His coverage skills, I think, go highly unnoticed because he's a big hitter, but he's very good covering or dropping back into coverage.
Okay. Nick, any questions there about Hackett?
Yeah, Hackett's another guy I like a lot, too. You mentioned he had 7 interceptions this last year, but he only had 5 total his first 2 seasons. Was that more from him struggling to catch the ball earlier in his career, or did he just get more opportunities and more balls thrown his way in 2014?
I think it's a little bit of a combination of the two. He has always been a pretty good coverage player when it comes to deflecting passes and that kind of thing. When you look at the other safeties that TCU has, specifically Sam Carter is incredible in coverage. We had a pretty good cornerback tandem this year in Kevin White and Ranthony Texada. Kevin White is another kid that has been popping up on scout radars since the Senior Bowl happened. And so maybe it's a little bit of a combination of the two, but I think this year what he really worked to do was improve his coverage skills and improve his ball skills when the ball is in the air, because he's always been a hard hitter, and I think he knew that in order to get to the next level, he was going to have to improve in that area.
Okay. Nick, did you have any other questions there about Hackett?
Nope, not on Hackett.
Okay. Kevin White, now, you mentioned that he's kind of popped back up. When I first started looking at mock drafts here in late December, he was kind of a guy that was going in the 12 to 20 range, and then for whatever reason, I've kind of seen him drop out of the first round. Do you have any idea why that would be, Jamie, or just people rushing, or is this maybe 5'9" frame got some people worried?
I don't know if I've ever seen him projected in the first round. Maybe that was the wide receiver Kevin White from West Virginia.
I'm pretty sure it was an early
Okay.
mock draft. Somebody had him probably going to the Texans at 16 or something like that. But
okay, I don't see him as a first round guy. I don't see him. I mean, he's solid. Since the end of the season, if you go back and watch his film, you'll see a lot of reasons to compare him to TCU's last first round draft pick, who was a cornerback, Jason Verrett. Same kind of footwork. Really fluid hips, quick to the ball when it's in the air. Doesn't really get beaten deep. He's pretty quick. Frame is a question again. Like you said, he's pretty small. Verrett is also pretty small. The thing about Kevin White, though, is he never really suffered any major injuries. He's a tough kid. He's pretty durable, even though he's a smaller corner. And he was magnificent in the back half of the season for TCU. I mean, he held West Virginia's wide receiver, Kevin White, who's a beast and a probable, in my opinion, top 15 draft pick. He held him to 3 receptions and 38 yards on that West Virginia game. He had an incredible Senior Bowl week, too, which I think helped his draft stock tremendously. I would see that I think he'll probably go third round-ish. I don't really see him going in the first 2 rounds just because questions about his size more than anything else.
Yeah, I went back and I double checked that. The 2 Kevin Whites are really messing with me at first, but I think
they're messing with everyone, man.
There's a couple. There's a Michael Bennett too, and I think there's another name that there's already an NFL player of too. But I like White. I think the speed. Do you have any idea what? Are we gonna? You talk about those guys' speed. Is he gonna be like a 4.5 guy or sub 4.4 guy?
About 4.5, 4.6. I think he's not nearly as fast as Jason Verrett, but not many people are. I think Verrett ran a 4.38 at the combine or something like that, something ridiculous. I think Kevin will probably be around a 4.5 flat.
Yeah, sorry about the chill with the 4.38 combine score there. I like that. But anyway, yeah, I think, and I think because that might be why he's falling, if he doesn't have that super top end speed and there's a little bit of a size issue, maybe some people have concerns. But I know my guys over at the Football Game Plan, Gene Clemens would slap me in the face for talking about the size of a cornerback, because they don't think that should be come into play at all. He can play, and if he can play, he can play. So I like him too, and I would love to see some somebody like White's caliber on my Oakland Raiders, or maybe your Cowboys can get him to Jamie.
Hey, I'd be totally all right with that.
Yeah. Nick, do you have questions there about White?
Well, you compared them to Jason Verrett, and, you mentioned that they're both about the same size, but Verrett has a speed advantage, which helps him get into the first round, and you were saying you think White will be more of like a third-round pick. Is it just speed that separates the two games? Other than speed, are they very similar?
I think they're similar, but if you're talking about overall skill level and ability, I think you have to put Jason Verrett at maybe Tier 1 and Kevin White at Tier 2 or 1B. Everything that Kevin White does is very good, and Jason Verrett, you can draw comparisons to Jason Verrett. Jason Verrett does everything, I think, maybe a step better, if that makes sense.
I was really, really looking forward to trying to pronounce this, but I don't have it in me today. The offensive tackle, I think the first name is Teo.
Yes.
We'll let you
Teo
take it from there. Oh, Teo Fabulaje. I can say that. That kind of rolls off the tongue, all right? Okay. What do you got for us on Mr. Fabulaje?
Well, he has had quite the journey. He transferred back and forth between TCU and BYU a couple of times, and so he actually only played 2 seasons with the Frogs. He redshirted at BYU in 2010, transferred to TCU after that year and sat out in 2011. In 2012, he played for TCU. He started 12 games. After the 2012 season, he transferred back to BYU, but he didn't participate in football. And then he transferred back to TCU before last season and started all 13 games. So he's been quite the traveler over his college career. But the guy is, just massive. He's about 6'7", 350, 360 pounds. If he gets his hands on you, you're done. You're not getting anywhere. Because he's just so physically large and strong. He's going to shut you down if he gets his hands on you. However, laterally, he's a little slow. So if you've got a good defensive end speed rusher, they can get around him. His footwork needs some work. But again, if he gets his hands on you, you're not going anywhere. And I think NFL scouts will really like him because you can work on lateral movement and footwork and that kind of stuff to help improve that. And if he gets it all together and puts it all together, I think he's going to be a long-time starter in the
NFL. Do you think there'll be some strong suggestions about maybe trimming a few pounds there too?
Oh, absolutely. I think that would help with the lateral movement and the footwork, and I think he can afford to because he's already pretty big, and his height will give him an advantage even if he doesn't quite have the pounds. So
okay.
He's definitely more of a project, though. He's a guy you pick up, and you're going to sit on him for a few years and really work with him.
Okay. Nick, any questions there about Mr. Fabulaje?
Well, yeah, at that size, I was wondering, do you project him to play probably right tackle as opposed to left tackle? The right tackles tend to be more of like the power run guys. And also, do you think he has the ability to switch in and move inside and play guard in like a power run scheme?
I think both of those are definitely possibilities. He wouldn't be a left tackle in the NFL, that's for sure. Like you said, the right tackle is the more power run tackle position, and so he would probably max out at a right tackle position. I don't know. I mean, I suppose if you can play tackle and you're a little laterally slow, the logical next step is to slide you inside to guard. I don't know how much actual experience he has at that position. But if you are talking about a team that's very run-heavy, maybe like, I don't know, I want to say Pittsburgh off the top of my head because they've got Le'Veon Bell, but I know that that's not necessarily anything. But if you want to put him on a run-heavy team like, say, the Cowboys or something and slide him into guard, I don't think that would be the worst thing. It might be a way that you can get him on the field a little bit quicker, too, if you're not asking him to cover quite a large amount of space as with the tackle position. So
okay, now maybe he could play a little fullback too, just to get him acclimated to the game. If you want to throw him in that goal line package, by all means. Yeah, there you go. Third tight end. Well, I'm glad I didn't say anything about Mr. Fabulajay, because I kind of had my specs mixed up here. I thought you had an undersized offensive lineman and a really big defensive tackle in Chucky Hunter, but Chucky Hunter's actually the guy that's a little bit undersized for a DT. He's 298, so yeah, he's 300 pounds, but he's only 6 feet tall. So what do you got for us on Mr. Chucky Hunter?
Well, Chucky is the guy that he is not going to take a playoff. He's got one of the highest motors I've ever witnessed. The guy, just all he wants to do is hit someone hard, and he's actually pretty decent at it, even for being undersized. In Power 5 schools, it's a lot different, or Power 5 conferences. With TCU, historically, they've been able to get away with having undersized linemen on both sides of the ball because you're playing smaller schools and because of the style of defense and that kind of thing. Moving to the Big 12, though, you've seen TCU bulk up a little bit, but Gary Patterson hasn't really sacrificed any kind of what he would call defensive values as far as speed is concerned or strength for guys that have pure size. And Chucky Hunter fits that mold pretty well. He's not going to be a big sack man from the tackle spot like Ndamukong Suh or anyone like that. Like he's more of a collapse the pocket kind of guy and let the ends do the rest. He's going to get pressure. He's going to force the quarterback to move. It's just a matter of whether or not he gets his hands on the quarterback. He is very good against the run. He had, I think, 9.5 tackles for loss in 2014 for TCU, which I think is a pretty substantial number for a defensive tackle. And so, he's strong. He's quick. He's able to shed blocks well. He's able to get in the backfield. But you're not ever going to see this kind of sack totals that you would want to see from a guy like Chucky, but he's going to get good pressure on the quarterback and help collapse that pocket.
Sure. Well, and that's what a DT's got to do. He's got to stuff the run and, like you said, collapse the pocket. So, and nice pronunciation there on Ndamukong Suh. I like that. Nick, any questions there about Hunter?
Yeah, Hunter moves pretty well for a 300-pound guy. He's supposedly got really good character, and he's super strong. I saw a couple numbers, a 520-pound bench and a 750-pound squat. So I'm just curious why he's not ranked higher than the mid to late rounds. Do you have any insight on that?
I mean, I think it's got to be size. He's slightly undersized. I don't think his arms are as long as people want them to be. People said the same thing about him when he was being recruited out of high school, though. LSU passed on him. He's a Louisiana kid from West Monroe. LSU passed on him because they thought he was undersized. A couple other SEC schools did the same. And he landed in TCU's lap, thankfully, and has been a beast for the Frogs. And I think we're going to see more of that at the next level where he might be a later round pick, and he's going to really help someone out on the line.
Okay. Yeah, I think it took a little while for people to really give in to Aaron Donald last year, and obviously he was a first round pick and done very well for himself. But I think he might kind of be might be the new breed going forward. I'm not saying Hunter's going to be the next Aaron Donald, but those guys, if they can get that speed or especially with his upper body strength, one would think that he can certainly move some 300-pounders out of his way. So, what do you got for us on Sam Hunter? He's got a couple minutes left here, Jake.
Sam Carter?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. The other safety?
Yes, Sam Carter.
Okay, I'm
Sam
sorry.
Hey, no problem. So Sam is one of those guys who you want on your team for no other reason than you are 100% sure he's not going to get into trouble. Sam is one of the nicest, most humble guys you're ever going to meet. He is a vocal leader in the locker room and on the field, and he's really that guy on TCU's defense that held everyone else accountable on the field, in the locker room, and in the classroom. He was one of the Lowe's class finalists for that award this year. He does an incredible amount of humanitarian work. And to top it all off, he's actually a really good safety also. He has been a 3-year starter for TCU. He started as a sophomore in 2012 and really never relinquished that position, which means he, first and foremost, if you start 3 years in a Gary Patterson offense, you have to be incredibly intelligent. It's not an easy offense or an easy defense to pick up. Patterson expects a lot out of his safeties. And so when you talk about a guy who's a 3-year starter in that program, you know that he's a guy with a good head on his shoulders, who's incredibly intelligent and knows a lot about the game. This year and in 2013, Sam Carter was expected to call the defense for the secondary on his half of the field. And so he was positioning his corner, his linebacker. He was responsible for the third safety, Derek Kindred, as well sometimes, and himself. And so when he was getting the play calls in from Patterson, he was recognizing the play and making adjustments on the fly on the field for his teammates and for himself. So even though he's a decent size for a safety, 6'1", 215-ish, he might be a little smaller than that. That's what he's listed at on the TCU website. But, I mean, you're getting a character guy who can compete and is intelligent enough to pick up things pretty quickly and make adjustments on the fly.
Okay, Nick, just a minute here, Nick. Do you have a question there about Mr. Carter?
Well, he had a good showing at the East-West Shrine Game practices, and he was one of the combine snubs you mentioned earlier. I think going into 2014, the biggest question mark around him was his tackling. Did that improve in this last year?
It did, and now it's still not probably where NFL scouts want it to be. He's still got some things to work on. He doesn't always break down very well against running backs or guys that already have the ball. His coverage skills are great, though, and I think if you sit down and work with him and work with his footwork and his tackling form, I think that'll improve pretty quickly.
Okay. Well, Jamie, I want to thank you so much for joining us. Again, it's Jamie Plunkett, frogsofwar.com. You also work with our buddy Tom Ryle over there at bloggingtheboys.com. So you're in deep there at SB Nation. I love it. Hopefully we can have you back.
Yeah, I'd love to come back on anytime you want.
All right, cool. Thank you, Jamie, and have a great day.
Thanks, you too.
All right, we will now move to Matt Brown from LandGrantHolyLand.com. Matt, are you there?
I am here. How you doing, fellas?
Good. Sorry to keep you on the phone there, sir. Thank you for joining us. We, of course, had you on to talk about some Buckeyes prospects. So why don't you just kind of tell us about what you do over there at LandGrantHolyLand.com?
Sure. So along with Luke Zimmerman, we are the two editors for LGHL. It's one of the largest team sites on the SB Nation network. We cover Ohio State from all angles: football, basketball, recruiting, non-revenue sports. I also work for SB Nation full-time, and along with Luke, we oversee all 93 of our college blogs. So I'm Jamie's boss.
Wow, you're Jamie's boss. That's very cool. So if I need to get somebody from one of your blogs, you can just tell them to call me. Is that right? You're the man in charge?
Yeah, sure. Theoretically, yeah, that could be how it works.
All right. Well, maybe we'll talk later about some of the guys that don't respond to me. But anyway, I'm just kidding. Since you are a representative of SB Nation, we have used a lot of your people on the show because after we kind of do our college thing here during the playoffs in the month of February, we go into team reviews as our podcast go forward up to the draft, kind of team previews and reviews of last year and kind of draft needs. So I've used a couple of people from the NFL sites as well there in SB Nation. And every time I use one of your guys, SB Nation guys, I'm always very impressed. We've had Matthew Weston from BattleBullBlog.com, I believe it is, and then Tom Ryle from Blogging the Boys as well. So had somebody on from Revenge of the Birds, Jesse Reynolds from Revenge of the Birds. So yeah, we always appreciate you, SB Nation guys, because you bring it, man. You bring it every time we have you on, and we appreciate your knowledge. So thank you again for doing it.
Sure, I'm glad to hear that. I'll have to relay those compliments.
Yeah, totally impressed. I've even was on another podcast and talked to a Mets blogger. He was awesome too. So let's get to the Ohio State prospects. You guys, as always, have some good ones and some super talent there. Obviously, national championship team. So congratulations on that. Very late congratulations on that. And maybe you could just fill us in on who's going to start at quarterback next year first for the Buckeyes. Do you have any idea yet there, James or Matt?
Yeah. So this is going to be a really interesting race, especially since you've got these three guys here. But for spring practice, it's really just Cardale Jones. J.T. Barrett and Braxton Miller are still injured. Barrett is projected to recover from his ankle a little bit shortly after the duration of spring camp. Braxton Miller is a little bit more. We're not exactly sure, just given the severity of the shoulder injury, but certainly won't be throwing in the spring. So, just based on that, I would, if you had to bet, Cardale Jones is probably the slight favorite since he's going to get more snaps and should probably use that time to get more familiar with the read option elements of Urban Meyer's offense, which are basically taken out of the playbook throughout his last 3 games. If Barrett is healthy, then I think you're going to have one hell of a battle in the fall, and I personally think Barrett is a better fit for what Ohio State's trying to do. But it's going to depend so much on who gets healthy and who makes the most of their spring practice.
I'd say switch them every play, man. Bring them both in. Make people prepare for both of them. Or just put Barrett in see what happens.
I mean, that wouldn't shock me. It would not surprise me at all to certainly see Braxton Miller on the field doing multiple things besides just that quarterback. If you're running a triple option or a read option with the play action pass, and one of those guys is Braxton Miller, the play becomes essentially unguardable.
Yeah. Well, and you have when you have I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought there. When you have guys like Barrett and Miller who have proven that they could play full games, Cardale Jones only has the 3 games. It's not like it's going to hurt their stock by any means, and you're just playing all of them and kind of showing off maybe just a little bit. But anyway, let's get to the prospects. Devin Smith, wide receiver. Seen him going as high as late first round. What are your thoughts there? I guess I'm not necessarily high on him, so sell me.
Yeah, he's an interesting prospect. I think not the most celebrated recruit coming out of high school, and was used. I don't want to say one-dimensional in Ohio State's offense, but was very much the deep ball specialist. Smith's speed is really outstanding, and I think that should translate to the NFL. It's not just straight ahead speed. He's fast in his routes. He's fast in games, and I think his ability to track balls in the air and fight for catches through contact was something that he really improved a lot, especially in his senior year. I'm not sure exactly whether he's going to go late first round, second round. Definitely, I would imagine before the early third, and it'll depend on whether a team needs a deep specialist. He's somebody who's smart enough that I think could contribute on special teams if a team wanted him to do that in the very beginning. Maybe not the most elite, well-rounded guy, but depending on what a team needs and for that scheme fit, to put him with a quarterback that's got a strong arm, he's going to be able to do some damage.
Yeah, certainly a deep threat. Just 33 receptions last year, but 12 touchdowns. That's pretty nice. Nick, any questions there about Mr. Smith?
Yeah, and another stat on Smith, 28 yards per catch. So like you guys said, he's definitely a deep threat. But I was wondering from a fantasy perspective, is he kind of a one-trick pony similar to a Kenny Stills where you're either going to get a deep ball from him or get pretty much nothing?
It seems a little bit that way with Ohio State. I don't think that's necessarily, his Smith's fault. It's just the product of the offense that Ohio State runs puts a high premium on ball distribution. Ohio State had their most talented and their deepest wide receiver core, I think, in years last year. So Smith just wasn't getting as many. The most efficient way to target him is if he's running down the field on a route that's 25 yards plus. In the NFL, where I imagine, even though I think he still projects to have plus speed in the NFL, you're not going to have those same physical advantages over other people. He may be able to be used in ways other than the deep ball. Perhaps very early, while he's still learning, that's the most likely place you're going to see him, but I don't think that's going to be the case for his entire career.
Okay. Is there... I kind of like the Kenny Stills comparison. Is there somebody maybe more that you had in mind with Smith?
I could certainly see that. I'm not sure if there's an exact one-to-one NFL comparison here, just given that the size is a little bit different. But that if that's who you're drafting and you're drafting that in the middle of the second round, you could do a whole lot worse.
Mm-hmm. And it's they're not the same type of player, certainly when moving forward into his career. But I see a little Terry Glenn. I know he's a little bit taller than Terry Glenn was. But Terry Glenn certainly had that ability to run that post or that deep route too, and really make you pay. So, Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just agreeing with you. Glenn, I think probably has better hands, but that's if that's the best case scenario. Again, that's high praise for Devin Smith. He's definitely somebody that I think should be able to contribute in the NFL.
Yeah. No, I know you talked about his speed, but I'm sure one thing everybody's going to be concerned about moving forward is his 40 time. Do you have any idea where that's going to be?
It's so hard to say because where guys are clocked at Ohio State and where guys are clocked as their recruits coming in and where they're clocked in the combine can vary by 0.2 of a second, 0.3 of a second. I don't think he's somebody that runs a 4.4. He's not necessarily like in terms of like a 40-yard dash, one of the 3 or 4 fastest guys on this team. But whatever number comes up there, like I can assure you, I've watched a lot of Devin Smith on tape. He's plenty fast.
Okay. Yeah. So excuse me, I'm a Raiders fan, so apparently always we're supposed to care about speed. So, may Al rest in peace. But anyway, Michael Bennett, not to be confused with the Seattle Michael Bennett, but defensive tackle here for Ohio State. What do you got on him for?
Yeah, Bennett is an interesting case. I mean, he was somebody who last year I think could have been a relatively early draft pick. He comes back to school, and in terms of box score statistics, probably presented didn't do quite as well as he did last year, but still, really the heart and soul of Ohio State's really superior defensive line. I think this was one of the reasons they were able to win a championship. And somebody who may not be a first rounder at this point, although he'd be a good fit I think for somebody like Dallas. Should also probably be picked in the first 2 rounds. He's got great size. He's an extremely smart player. Somebody who I think had a great record of getting better as an underclassman. Somebody who has a record of being very coachable. And I think if he gets a little bit of work on his technique, particularly, and I think improving the efficiency of that technique, so he doesn't kind of peter off a little bit in the fourth quarter, or is able to bring that same relentless energy, then he could be really great. Ohio State didn't have as much depth on the defensive line outside of their top level as I think they would have liked to. So that may have led to him playing a few more snaps than he would have liked, which might have contributed to some of that fatigue. But somebody, if I had to guess who's going to have the best NFL career of Ohio State's draft class, I think it's going to be Bennett.
Okay, well, certainly good praise there. Now, he's another guy, a little bit undersized for the defensive tackle. A lot of these guys in the NFL are 320, but I think maybe you can echo this statement, Matt. I don't think anybody's going to be concerned once they see maybe the stamina, especially that he built up in college, and maybe taking a few more plays than he needed to, or playing a few more plays than he maybe should have. But when you see a defensive tackle that's 288, we're probably not going to see that thing that Danny Shelton has in the middle of his body. We're gonna see somebody that's probably pretty cut. Does he have a lot of upper body strength too? That's going to help him there in the middle of the line.
He's very strong. I think other people who have written a lot about his draft potential think there may be some room for improvement with his lower body strength, but I don't think that he's necessarily a finished product as far as his body is concerned. He's at in the high 280s now. He could probably play a little bit bigger than that. He's not going to be a 320-pound pot-bellied behemoth. But that's okay because again, given for the right team and for the right situation, you may not necessarily need him to be that way. Especially since I think that he's a smart enough player that he knows how to get the most out of his body and get in the backfield without necessarily just needing to stampede over people.
Yeah, and exactly what you said there. I used the comparison of Aaron Donald earlier when we were talking about Chucky Hunter. These guys, these smaller DTs aren't going to plug the run. They're going to stop it in the backfield, like you just said. They're going to create havoc on that line and maybe stop it or make the guy bump outside to await in the arms of an edge rusher. Nick, any questions there about Michael Bennett?
Yeah, I was wondering if at 288 pounds, do you think he can hold up every down, or do you see him as more of an interior pass rush specialist, one of those really key role players that comes in on third downs and gets you 8 to 10 sacks a season?
I don't know if he's if he would be best utilized necessarily as an every down person. I think he has the potential to do that. Maybe not this year, depending on the conditioning program that he gets into, and depending on who he shares that line with. I think he would be valuable as somebody who is a specialist. I don't think that he's physically limited or constrained in some way that would make it so he couldn't play every snap. It would depend on the rest of the personnel. He played quite a bit for Ohio State, maybe a little bit more than he would have been perfect for, and was still very good, and absorbed double teams and freed things up along with the guys there on that line, and was still able to get in the backfield a little bit. Granted, Purdue's not in the NFL, but there's the potential for him to be able to do that at the next level.
Okay, little Purdue bashing, huh? No, I'm just kidding. Love the Boilermakers. But anyway, I'm sorry. Doran Grant is the next name we have in there, cornerback. What do you got on him, class?
Yeah, so Grant, I think really benefited a lot from Ohio State's coaching change in the secondary, bringing in Chris Ash. Before, like the 2013 Ohio State team, their secondary got torched by both quarterbacks and wideouts that had a pulse and some that didn't. And this year, with some more aggressive coverages and some coaching staff that was able to, and the fact that it was extremely young secondary before, really helped Ohio State as an entire team improve dramatically there. And Grant was really the shutdown corner of that group. Now, I don't think I would be shocked if he projected that in the NFL. There's some concerns about his size. He's a little bit smaller, both weight, height, and speed as far as the NFL is concerned. But he's a very good tackler in space, and somebody that could easily be a corner who could help out in zone coverage or be a contributing part of someone. We've kind of seen right now him being bandied about from the fourth round all the way up to the late second, depending on need. He's somebody that's going to make a roster and be able to do some things, but he's not. I don't think he's someone you could really put out on the island. He's not Bradley Roby.
Okay. Oh yeah, Roby was a fun guy. As far as Grant goes, he's got the 5'10", 199 frame, so he's not. That's pretty typical for that kind of cornerback there in the NFL. Certainly he could hopefully. Does he have the speed to stay with a slot receiver, or maybe he'd be better served the first couple of years just playing some special teams and kind of seeing how he gets used to NFL contact and that type of thing? What do you think?
My gut is that he's going to end up playing a lot of special teams. I think he's fast enough to be able to play slot. But you say this, you bring somebody in here, and a guy gets injured, and before you know it, he's in your rotation. But I imagine when he's picked, the ideal situation would be for him to play some special teams and kind of absorb things and kind of grow up from there.
Okay, Nick, any questions there?
Yeah, two quick questions. I was wondering, was he used in college predominantly in man or zone, or was it a real mixture of the two? And also, in the playoff game against Alabama, did he shadow Amari Cooper, who was held to 71 yards in that game, or was that more of a reflection on Ohio State's secondary as a whole?
I would say it's both for both of those. Ohio State played a little bit more man-to-man last year than they did the year before. They were a little bit more aggressive. Grant sometimes came in and blitzed. In man-to-man coverages, he was able to shut down a lot of the wideouts. For Amari Cooper, that was definitely a multi-person effort. He played a large role in bumping him and making sure that he got uncomfortable. But wherever Cooper was going, Von Bell or safety or somebody else was going to be around there as well. Because with a guy like Cooper, you really kind of have to bracket him or have multiple guys around him. And Ohio State's case, and hope that Lane Kiffin doesn't remember to run the football, which he didn't. Because one guy, even a good college corner, I think Cooper showed is not enough to slow him down. He still got 71 yards. He still had a good game.
Mm-hmm. Since we went there, maybe just off the cuff, do you think Amari Cooper is the best receiver in this draft? Because I'm not sold on him.
So here's what I'll say. I admit I follow college football dramatically more closely than I do the NFL. And so when people ask you this, I would just say Amari Cooper was the best wide receiver that I saw in college football last year. Might have been the best wide receiver I saw in college football the last 2 years. Does that necessarily one-to-one mean that he's going to be the best NFL wide receiver? So much of that depends on who your quarterback is and who your offensive coordinator is and what kind of continuity you can enjoy and your health. And so, sure, it's possible that there may be a wideout who will end up better than him. But he was the best guy that I saw. And quite frankly, one of the most dominant guys at his position that I saw in all of college football. I think like the difference between him and like Kevin White is greater than it might have been between the best and the second best guy at some other positions.
Okay, well, I'm going to trust your knowledge, especially when you bring in last year's draft class, because that was an incredible wide receiver class. And it's going to be hard to compare any class to them ever, but I think there's some special talent in there, and thanks for that off the cuff. I do appreciate that. Moving on, Jeff
Hireman.
Howard, is it Howerman?
Hireman. Yeah, I know it's a tough name.
What do you got for him, tight end?
Yeah, so Hireman's the last guy here from Ohio State's group that got invited to the Combine. And he's somebody that going into this season projected to be one of the best tight ends in college football. And then he struggled with his health the entire year. He messed up his foot in camp. He thought he was going to be healthy at the beginning of the year. Really wasn't. Was only 100% for a couple of games. Was injured against Alabama and late in the season as well. He played anyway. And also, throughout the scheme-wise, was used way more as a blocking tight end than he was a pass-catching target. And that wasn't what Ohio State was projecting to do going into the year. And this is both a reflection of him not being totally healthy, Ohio State learning to rely more on their power running game than perhaps they had anticipated, and the fact that Ohio State had a lot of really talented pass-catching targets, and so they wasn't necessarily needed as much. That being said, he's still a big body of somebody who is, I think, effective in the pass catching game in the red zone, and somebody that I think is going to have a better NFL career if he had a senior season. Once he's able to go in there and get healthy before the combine, I feel like his measurables and his strength is going to be able to overcome maybe the lack of great film that he picked up his senior year. And while I don't think he's as good either as a player or an NFL prospect as somebody like Minnesota's Max Williams. He's somebody that I think could be a third, fourth rounder and somebody who could be contributing.
Okay, Nick, any questions there on Howerman?
Well, he's got some, but not a lot of work in the passing game. I think 26 catches is his season high. So I was wondering, but he is a great blocker. Do you think he's more of a throwback tight end who, say, 15 years ago would have gone a lot higher in the draft than he will this year, just due to the premium being placed on stretching the field at the tight end position now?
He didn't get a ton of targets last year, but Hireman's somebody who can catch the football. If you put him up and put him in, say, Iowa's offense, he's catching 40 passes. He's catching for 500 something yards, where he's now like the number 2 offensive option. And given the importance of making sure Ezekiel Elliott's getting 7 yards a carry and making sure that the other 6 guys who are a little faster than him for Ohio State are able to get touches, he's not throwing the ball as much. But he does have good hands. I think he has good awareness of where he is down the field. And once he gets healthy and is able to show people his natural gifts, I like him more as a more complete tight end necessarily.
Okay, I think a lot of it has to do. I mean, you're kind of saying the same thing. Just the scheme. I really like C.J. Fedorowicz last year out of Iowa, and I still think he's going to be a great tight end in the NFL. I mean, is that a fair comparison to maybe where Howerman is at now?
Maybe. I think I'd have to look at the gentleman there from Iowa a little bit more to be sure. I'm not sure of the best the best comparison here, because he's not really like anybody else that we've seen here in the Big Ten. I think in terms of the way that his game is, and I'm not sure of the best NFL guy. I just know that the box score and what we saw for the last year and a half is not a completely accurate representation of what he's capable of doing.
Okay, well, he certainly has the size, and might be kind of a a dark horse fantasy tight end next year if he can get in the right scheme there. Moving on, Evan Spencer, wide receiver. What do you?
So the last 2 or 3, I guess, if you want to count Rod Smith, the last guys. So these are people who will probably not get drafted. Evan Spencer and Curtis Grant were not invited to the combine. But Evan Spencer, both of them, I think, are the kinds of people that I would, not only would it not surprise me, like I would expect them to end up in camp and are the kind of people that are want to be picked up as undrafted free agents. The reason for the thing that's great about Spencer, and I think that he was praised more by Ohio State's coaching staff throughout the season than maybe anybody else, which is crazy given, again, the high-end talent on that offense. And that's because he is a terrific blocker. Really a very physical player, probably the single smartest player on Ohio State's team. And given that Ohio State wants to run a power rushing game through a spread offensive set, it makes blocking on the perimeter so critical for making sure that Ezekiel Elliott or some of their H-backs are able to get into space on the outside and start running. And none of that's able to happen unless Evan Spencer is able to consistently lock up this guy. He's not the fastest wide receiver. He's not the best route-running wide receiver. He has, I think, pretty good hands. He showed he had an arm. He threw a touchdown pass this season, and it was a beautiful one. And somebody that it would not shock me if he's picked up because he's exactly the kind of guy that you want on your practice squad. He's exactly the kind of person that you want with your special teams and pushing guys to get better. I don't know how long he's going to hang around the league, but I do know that there's going to be a bunch of college coaches who would love to have that guy as a graduate assistant as soon as he's done.
Okay, well, sometimes that good IQ certainly lands you a spot in places that you shouldn't have gotten to otherwise. Nick, any questions there?
Well, yeah, he wasn't very productive on the stat sheet, but like you said, Urban Meyer called him the team MVP. He says he's a 4.40 guy. I guess we'll see on that. But he's got good hands, and I was wondering, do you think he's got a chance to be one of those rare players who performs better in the pros than he did in college, just due to, like we've talked about before, the not many opportunities to shine in the Ohio State system? I mean, if it's me, if you're asking me if I would take Devin Smith in the 2nd or Spencer in the 6th or 7th round, I would take Spencer.
I would not do that, but I mean I don't have a ton of confidence in Evan Spencer as NFL wide receiver who's expected to earn money by catching passes and breaking tackles. Could Evan Spencer be picked up in the 7th round or as an undrafted free agent and make a 5-year career and a bunch of money by cracking skulls on special teams and being an excellent practice person and being a very, very good blocker? For the right team, you bet. He may very well have be clocked around that kind of speed. Like that's from following Ohio State's program. He typically wasn't mentioned as somebody who was one of the fastest guys straight ahead, and in terms of route running or being able to get himself open. Even though Ohio State, I think, tried to throw him the ball a couple of times, even when he wasn't open, just because they liked it so much and wanted to get him catches. He really didn't show that he's able to do that. But he's so good at some of the other things that don't show up on that stat sheet that you need wide receivers to be able to do, that he was instrumental to Ohio State being successful. And for the certain team, he could provide that. He might be a great guy to have around the Bengals or something. But I don't know that I would draft him hoping that he's going to be my number 3 wide receiver someday.
Okay. Last name there, Curtis Grant, another guy that maybe not going to get drafted, but he's a guy I really like. I think he could certainly be a contributor, wherever in that special teams realm or whatnot. And I'm going to bring a comparison up because that's just who I am. It's what I do. But kind of a guy like Chris Borland, and maybe I'm wrong here, Matt, but Borland was a guy that I think a lot of people were high on, and then for whatever reason he dropped like a rock in the draft. And obviously we saw what he did last year at San Francisco. And I think some people were high on Grant at some point in time in this season, and for whatever reason, he's kind of fallen off the map. Can you explain why that is?
Yeah, so I'm thinking about this here for a second. Chris Borland was a little bit of an overlooked high school prospect. An Ohio kid from a good program, didn't get an Ohio State offer. A bunch of other guys had looked at him, and then he had been this extremely productive college player. And my memory may be wrong here. I thought that he did really well in the Senior Bowl. but his measurables didn't wow people, and so he wasn't picked up as much. Maybe I'm wrong there with Borland. Grant's kind of the opposite, because Grant was this extremely celebrated 5-star recruit who was supposed to be the next A.J. Hawk for Ohio State. And his career, really until this season, was mostly very underwhelming. Like, he was kind of the guy that was bandied about in Ohio State circles whenever people would get really excited about a recruiting class. They're like, I don't know, this 4-star might end up like Curtis Grant. And injuries are part of that. I think he came into school a little bit immature, maybe a little bit expecting things to be handed to him. He had trouble cracking the rotation, really struggled with over-pursuing guys in space, wasn't the most fundamental player. This year, he had a really nice season. Man, that middle linebacker spot, we kind of go back and forth here with Laquan McMillan, who's Ohio State's next big 5-star thing, who will be starting in that spot next season. Grant might not have his football IQ improved, his work ethic improved, and because of his size, and he is a really fast player, he's somebody that I imagine is going to get. I mean, he could potentially still get drafted despite not going to the combine just because of his physical body of work. But if you look at him on tape, and if you look at what he accomplished at Ohio State, given his physical gifts, I think it's very easy to reach the conclusion that he's underperformed. And whether that's between his ears or, the health with his legs or what have you, there's lots of reasons for that. Is it possible for him to be able to put all those things together, find the right team, get drafted as a 7th rounder, and have a productive NFL career where he's like a good bench guy? Sure. I mean, you're not named a 5-star high school prospect in an extremely competitive state like Ohio if you're not good, or if people don't think that you're going to be good and you really don't have those skills. He hasn't translated that yet, but it's still possible.
Yeah, with a guy like him, I just think the talent is there, and if he just something needs to happen to steer in the right direction. So I do believe the talent is there with him, certainly. Nick, any questions?
Yeah, I was just wondering how large a factor do you think the crowded depth chart there at linebacker with Ohio State was in a factor of him not producing like people thought he would?
A little bit, but when you come in with that celebrated at linebacker, you should be able to beat out some of those guys. And while Ohio State's linebacker depth chart now is extremely crowded, and I think will be for the foreseeable future, given that they've signed like 8 blue chip guys over the last 2 classes. Really, prior to Urban Meyer, or really prior to last year, the depth chart of Ohio State was really thin. I mean, that 2012 team where they went undefeated, where Curtis Grant's on the roster, Urban Meyer had to go pull a fullback who hadn't played linebacker since high school and stick him in there because their depth was so bad. So he came in and had all these gifts, but couldn't beat out a couple of 3-star guys or guys that were coming in from other positions.
Well, and maybe this is the disrespect he needs. That people say maybe he just needs to be told he's not going to get drafted, and that's gonna make him work that much harder. And if he gets that free agent deal or gets that 7th round pick, maybe that's going to be the wake up call to move himself in the right direction. So,
yeah, you hope that. You would think that maybe that wake up call would have come a year or 2 before. He's had to come to those opportunities at Ohio State, and to his credit, like, he was good this year. He was an important contributor. Had 10 tackles against Alabama. Instincts aren't great, but he as a college football player, he wasn't bad.
Well, Matt, I want to thank you so much for joining us. Sorry if we kept you a little long there, and you maybe should have told me that you were in charge of the SB Nation college sites, but I guess you did. So I'm sure you'll be seeing some email for me in the future, but I promise I won't bother you too much.
All right. Thanks, fellas.
All right. Yeah, thanks, Matt. Have a great day.
Yeah, you too. Bye.
All right. Certainly some good insight from both Jamie and Matt there, representing SB Nation really well, like they always do. So, Nick, Seattle defenders are dropping like flies, yet Dominican Sue thinks he wants to join them. I think I don't necessarily want him to be on the Raiders, but there's certainly money to be made elsewhere. And would Seattle even consider this prospect? Are they going to be concerned about their health?
Well, start with the health. Yeah, the secondary's beat up. Timber, they'd be healthy enough. I'd take all those injured guys at 85 to 90% over most other guys in the league at 100%. And you look at the injuries, there's only one leg injury that could possibly hurt their speed, and that's Cam Chancellor, who tore his MCL, but he played on it during the Super Bowl, so you'd think it's probably not a really bad tear. So if injuries aren't really a concern, then what defender in their right mind wouldn't want to be part of a defense with that much swagger and that some consider to be one of the best of all time? That being said, though, I'd be shocked if it happened at the price tag Sue likely is going to want. Big money free agents doesn't seem to really be the Seahawks style. I know they have an estimated $34 million in cap space, but they're rumored to be giving Marshawn Lynch a raise, plus Russell Wilson will soon be part of the $100 million quarterback club probably. And you look at Ndamukong Suh, J.J. Watt just got a $100 million contract. Suh could probably get close to that on the open market, but no, I don't think he would in Seattle.
Okay, yeah, it's a weird situation there. And I know we talked a little bit about last week, but I just feel like if I don't want him. I like him and obviously what he does right now. But if Oakland was to sign him, I don't think that he's going to be, he's not going to be at the peak of his career towards the end of that deal when Oakland's ready to compete. So I don't think he's going to want to go to a team that was sub 500 last year either. I think he's going to really be motivated if he does leave to find a team that is certainly playoff worthy. What about I want to throw Atlanta out there. It seemed like maybe they could use a little edge on defense, a little more guts, and we certainly have seen that from Sue. So. Mock draft. We're on to the mock draft after this, but first, each and every week I give my co-host Nick the floor to something that's kind of bothering him. And usually it's football related, sometimes it's not. But this week we have DeAnthony Thomas's dynasty future underneath the microscope. What do you got for us, Nick?
So normally in dynasty formats, if you have a running back with under 200 yards rushing, under 200 yards receiving, and only 2 touchdowns on the season, one of those coming on a punt return, he'd be a no-brainer guy to release in dynasty leagues. But I don't think I'd be so hasty with soon-to-be second-year running back DeAnthony Thomas. So I'll tell you why. First off, he's really young. He's only going to be 22 this upcoming season. And while we were all blown away by this year's rookie wide receiver class, that's not the norm. Usually players take some time to adjust to the pro level. Now, he missed the first month of the season, so he's limited to under 200 offensive snaps as a rookie. But given his experience now and Jamal Charles' age and the lack of weapons at wide receiver, I could definitely see that approaching more closer to the 400 snap mark this year. And that brings me to the next reason. The receivers on this team are not very good, to put it lightly. They proved me wrong last year. I said no way a decent team this day and age could go a full season without a wide receiver catching a touchdown. But they managed to do it. Dwayne Bowe's okay, but Donnie Avery, Junior Hemingway, Frankie Hammond, defenses aren't going to be afraid of those guys, especially with Captain Checkdown Alex Smith running the show. And lastly, DeAnthony Thomas has a rare combination of great short area quickness and acceleration to go along with world-class top-end speed, with the pads on anyway. I don't care if he was a 4.5, 40 guy at the combine. He played a lot faster than that. And he's got an uncanny ability to make defenders miss. Now, I admit, in my position, I'm biased. He played at Oregon. I'm a Ducks fan. And I'm spoiled in my dynasty league. It's the best ball league, so I don't have to worry about him picking and choosing when he's going to go off. And I've got running backs like Donald Brown, Trent Richardson, Roy Halou that are likely going to be easy cuts at that position come August. But even in normal dynasty leagues, I still love DeAnthony Thomas as a buy low, kind of a bye-week filler type of guy to stash on your roster. He's a playmaker, and Andy Reid's going to figure out ways to utilize him. Josh?
Oh, yeah, the Darren Sproles tiny running back / receiver thing is always the easy comparison. But is there anybody else out there, Nick? I mean, he is certainly a unique player because of his size, but man, can he fly. I mean, you watch those college highlights and it just looks like he's in fast forward and everybody else is going in motion. But is there another comparison to kind of help me catch my bearings about weighing in on the subject?
I think you nailed it when you said he's just a really unique player. Even the Darren Sproles comparison, I don't like that much height-wise, yes, but Sproles is a lot thicker than DeAnthony Thomas. Thomas is pretty slender, but, yeah, he can just fly on a football field.
Well, obviously Kansas City is rumored to be, and this is just draft pundits saying they need to draft a wide receiver in the first round. Whether that's going to be the case or not, we will see. I remember talking to a college coach a few years back who was a big Kansas City Chiefs fan, and when they were drafting overall, and he said that they should take offensive linemen with all 7 of their picks and just hope that 5 of them pan out. So they maybe still need an offensive lineman or 2. There's certainly holes to fill there, but Thomas had some weird kind of nagging injuries to start the year, and maybe that hindered him as a rookie. But it's like you said, he maybe is just a guy worth taking at the last round because he's going to be there. Frankly, he's going to be there, and just seeing what happens. He could have those good weeks. I still think he's a player that's going to be limited with touches, but he's going to have those weeks where he scores a couple touchdowns or has an 80-yard reception. I think that's certainly going to be the case for Thomas. We're not writing him off just yet. Certainly, like you said, Andy Reid's pretty innovative with his offense, and they'll find something to do with him, I think, to get him more involved, especially if he's fully healthy when training camp starts and they can get him more in the mix of things. I like the kid, and I hope he can get more involved. So we've been kind of going through the numbers of NFL players. This week we have number 8 under the microscope. So Nick, you forgot one of the best Oakland Raiders of all time, Ray Guy. But what else? What else you got?
Well, we'll start with some runners-up. Yeah, Ray Guy definitely is a bad oversight on my part. But, from 1960 to 1972, the St. Louis Cardinals had an 8-time All-Pro free safety, Larry Wilson. He was the 1966 Defensive Player of the Year, 52 career interceptions, and in that Player of the Year season in 66, he had 10 picks with 2 touchdowns. Then you look at some quarterbacks. You have Sexy Rexy Grossman started a Super Bowl for Chicago. 2-time All-Pro kicker Nick Lowry is our obligatory kicker mention. He had an 18-year career. Archie Manning would be a lot higher on the list, except that his best season he only finished 8-8. Matt Hasselbeck had almost 35,000 yards, 203 touchdowns, and a Super Bowl appearance. Mark Bunnell led a young Jacksonville team to winning records in the 96 through the 99 seasons, including going 13-2 as a starter in 99, and he had one of the biggest playoff upsets ever in 96 when they defeated the number 1 seeded Denver Broncos 30-27 in the playoffs. But much like our discussion last week in the number 7, this really boils down to just 2 guys. First off, you got Steve Young, 2-time NFL MVP, 7 straight Pro Bowls, a Super Bowl champion. He was a running quarterback long before it was cool to be a running quarterback. 4,200 yards and 43 touchdowns on the ground to go along with 33,000 passing yards and 232 touchdowns through the air. Had he not spent time in the USFL, 2 years on a bad Tampa Bay team, and 4.5 years backing up Joe Montana, I think he'd likely be the number 8 of all time. But I'm going to actually take Troy Aikman, 6 straight Pro Bowls, a 3-time Super Bowl champion. His numbers aren't as good as Steve Young's, but he also had an all-pro running back Emmitt Smith to hand the ball to, so Aikman wasn't asked to do as much, but he did everything asked of him. Plus, given the Cowboys' reputation in the 90s as basically a locker room of huge egos, some under the influence of assorted substances, the fact that he was able to lead those guys, get them to come together as a team and win multiple titles, and he's a great announcer too, I'm going to give it to Troy Aikman.
Yeah, there was you forgot Trent Dilfer, by the way, another Super Bowl quarterback. But anyway, Aikman, to lead, like you said about that team, like I said, I finished that book called Boys Will Be Boys by Jeff Pearlman. To be the quarterback of that team and to have success, it was truly amazing. Yes, there was talent there, but to kind of harness everybody in, move them forward into a game like that, I don't know how he did it. He certainly had a lot of patience, even to deal with, Jimmy Johnson and the weirdness of Barry Switzer as well. He certainly had a lot. And Steve Young obviously fell into an extremely fortunate situation there with Jerry Stickum Rice. I opted not to go there this week. We'll just leave it at that. But and John, obviously John Taylor, Roger Craig, Tom Rath, and Brett Jones. He had weapons aplenty and a team that was already a perennial playoff contender every year. So, but still, he was the captain of that ship, and he was got them to a lot of places, and have a lot of respect for him as well. He's kind of one of those guys where he had a great NFL career and was very decorated with the Super Bowl. With the Super Bowls and the MVPs, but had he not had those concussion issues throughout his entire career, it might have been a different story. Because, like you said, he kind of had the mobility before anybody had really seen it, and had he not had those concussion issues, he might have been up there at least as far as I'm concerned in that Elway range. I know they're kind of maybe both the same player, but maybe we would be talking about him over Elway at some point after they had retired. So I a lot of respect for both of those guys. They're obviously Raymond Guy, the best punter who ever lived, and I know that's probably because the Raiders had some extremely down years. That's why he has been elevated into such a Hall of Fame legendary status, if you will. Love the guy, and it's always nice to have somebody best at their position. Not a lot of people can say that because he was. I mean, he did so much. He made hang time a stat. He was just a phenomenal player, and gonna wish we the Raiders obviously had Shane Leckler and Marquette King in recent years too, and we've had some pretty good punters, but it's gonna be hard for anybody to really take over that torch as best punter ever. So a lot of respect for Mr. One of my Raiders there, Raymond Guy. Moving on there, Nick. Sorry, too many screens in front of me as always. Oh, mock draft. That's why I had that up. I need to go make a pick in my mock draft for like I said, we are joining the Dynasty Football Warehouse, and of course we are already starting our mock draft. So I'm going to go make my pick. It's Nick. Why don't you just fill everybody in on who you've taken so far?
Well, it's an IDP Dynasty League, so a little different format than I'm used to, but I took our friend Dynasty Dan's advice. He said to stock up on receivers early in Dynasty format, so I went with Odell Beckham in the first round, Kelvin Benjamin in the second round, and then quarterbacks were starting to go off the board, so I got a little worried, so I grabbed Cam Newton there in the third round, just to make sure I had a good young single collar for years moving forward.
Okay. Yes, I need to make my pick, but apparently I'm not signed in here. We'll get back to that here. But anyway, I've took Luke Kuechly in a second. I took Andrew Luck with my first pick overall. That was 11th overall. Got to have a good quarterback, and he was the first quarterback off the board. And then, of course, somebody took J.J. Watt right before me, so I felt compelled to also jump on the defensive player bandwagon. But it's not going to let me pick here. I'll have to do that after the show. But anyway, sorry for all that build up. I'm sure I'm going to take a receiver, probably the best receiver available. Oh, I'm going to take what's his name? Why can't I think of his name, Nick? Mr. Hopkins, DeAndre Hopkins. That's how I'm going to take. He's not gone yet, right? Because you know how much I love that guy. But anyway, yeah, I'm going to take DeAndre Hopkins, and we'll get back to that. So sorry for all the build-up and no. But, yeah, I'm taking my boy DeAndre Hopkins. I think he showed what he could do last year, and he's only going to get better. Nick, is RG3 done in Washington? A letter to the fans has spawned some thoughts.
Well, it was not the first time we've prematurely said this. Even South Park pulled him for Kirk Cousins in their Redskins episode last season. I just think it's too early to tell. We're not going to know before the draft. I doubt that Mariota or Winston are going to be around at pick number 5 when the Redskins pick. If one is, I think they should try like heck to trade the pick to somebody who wants to jump the leapfrog the Jets, who pick at 6, who would definitely take one of those guys if they were there. But, if they can't trade the pick, I do think they would actually take the quarterback. It's no secret that head coach Jay Gruden's not a big fan of any of the quarterbacks on that roster. And then if they do draft one, I think they would probably trade Griffin later on in the draft. If they don't draft a quarterback, then yeah, I think he stays and competes for the job. And what else are they going to do, sign Brian Hoyer and cut Griffin? I mean, the upside just doesn't really match there. I think you'd have a fan revolt on your hands. I don't see the 2 quarterbacks in the draft still there. I think likely they're going to go 1 and 2 to Tampa Bay and Tennessee. But I do believe actually later on we're going to talk about another scenario that those quarterbacks are gone by 5.
You think I know what I teased you about? We'll see. Yeah, who's going to trade for?
Well, I mean, I think it would be you're talking like a 4th, 5th round pick at this point.
Okay. Well, there's certainly teams. Let me ask you this: let's say you're not a Washington Redskins fan. Take your shirt off right now. And you're a GM. Based on their body of work and obviously the health concerns, who would you take, Robert Griffin or Sam Bradford? Like you got to take one of these guys to start your expansion franchise.
As my starting quarterback?
Yes.
I think I would go Griffin just by a hair, just because I think I look at their best seasons, and I think Griffin's best season as a rookie was better than the best that Sam Bradford has been able to show as far as being able to take a team on your back and carry them. But it's really close. I just think Griffin has a little bit more upside.
Yeah, to answer that question myself, I think I'd maybe just keep looking.
Yeah, that'd be your best option.
Well, let's see, Jimmy Clausen. I think I would probably actually maybe see if I could convince Mark Sanchez to come play for me before that. But I think you're right there, Griffin by a hair. I think the ability's there, and I mean, at least Griffin completed one season. Even if he got hurt towards the end, I don't think Bradford's ever been able to do that. So, there's a lot of things flying about people considering him to actually be a starting quarterback next year. I don't see any reason why he's wearing a helmet instead of a clipboard. I just don't know who would trust him at this point in time. So let's put on a different GM hat now, Nick. You're the Cleveland Browns. And now, have you watched the movie Draft Day? Isn't that as it says about the Cleveland Browns?
I actually haven't watched that yet. Not yet. No.
I haven't either. We should watch that. We're busy, guys. But wait a minute, we should watch that. It's about the football. It's about pro football. But anyway, in that movie, Kevin Costner is the GM or whatever player personnel of the Cleveland Browns. So this scenario, you're Kevin Costner, Crash Davis of Bull Durham fame. But anyway, we're getting off the subject here. You're Kevin Costner. I don't know who the Raiders guy when that movie was. I'm Reggie McKenzie or Mark Davis without the weird haircuts. Now I'm going to call you and say, listen, the draft's going. Let's say you got Cooper, Amari Cooper's still available. Cleveland, even maybe Cleveland after Matt's ringing endorsement, maybe Cleveland wants to draft him since Josh Gordon is a mess. You really like this Amari Cooper guy, don't you, Nick? I'm trying to really sell you here. I want to trade you my pick, Nick, for your 2 first-round picks. What do you think?
Okay, so you at Oakland are at number 4. I've got the number 12 and the 19 overall pick. That 19 pick came from Buffalo in the Sammy Watkins trade last year. So, yeah, I'm assuming it's only for Amari Cooper or a quarterback that this trade would be even considered. I personally wouldn't. You look at Cleveland, a quarterback or a wide receiver away from being a true contender. I don't think so. I think they need help on the defensive line. And obviously, they need a quarterback and a receiver. And now with the Gordon suspension. And also word is that tight end Jordan Campbell Cameron doesn't want to re-sign. The team's projected around $30 million, I think, in cap space. So maybe if they can fill some of those holes in free agency, they'd pull a trigger on a trade like that. I personally wouldn't, but I rarely agree with the decisions Cleveland makes. So that might mean it's inevitable. And if they do make that trade, at least the quarterback, if it is a quarterback, has a pretty solid offensive line there with the Browns protected.
Yeah, definitely. Well, here's my thoughts. If we can somehow, maybe we could sweeten the deal by giving Cleveland like a second-round pick next year or something. But if Oakland was to trade down, and I really need to go back and watch film on Amari Cooper because I don't think that he's going to be the home run hitter that it was in college. Obviously, it's going to be hard to replicate that. But I think as a whole, I really like these players that are in, first, end of the first, middle, second round. I think there's a lot of talent in this draft, but I don't think there's, I really like Shaq Thompson, but I don't think he's a way better player than anybody else in the first round. So what I'm trying to say is I think there's a lot of talent in the first round, but nobody stands out besides maybe Leonard Williams as the absolute, number one player. And obviously needs going to dictate some of that. But I think that everybody in this first round is right about the same talent level. So if I could trade down and get 2 picks, I would much prefer to take like a guy like La'el Collins, offensive tackle out of LSU. I love this guy. He's a huge man, but can move and just punish people when you're running the ball. Excuse me. So if I could trade down and get him, and then maybe like a Kevin White or a Devontae Parker type of wide receiver, I see an opportunity there to really, Oakland's got cap space, so if these guys are really good, they can maybe continue to sign them. But we'll see how that all works out. But if Oakland can maybe somehow trade out of that position, because where I think I like drafting that high, but if they can trade down and maybe save a little money up front, I think it's a possibility. And I'm not an NFL GM, and I don't fully understand how that salary cap situation works. Just my thoughts. So Cleveland Brown fans, keep that in mind. Maybe you could text your GM or whoever that was texting the sidelines. But anyway, yeah.
Can I pose one more option to you? Let's say you're
I'm Oakland. I got that 4th pick.
You're not there at Oakland. Cleveland's offering you their 2 first-round picks. The Jets, sitting there at number 6, are worried the Redskins are going to take a quarterback. So they're offering you the number 6 overall and next year's first-round pick. Which one do you take?
I don't know next year's draft class well enough, Nick. I can only focus on one draft class at a time. I still think I take the Cleveland deal. I would rather trade down because I feel like even if Kevin White goes, I'm okay with that. I feel like Devontae Parker would still be there. If you haven't seen film on Devontae Parker out of Louisville, the guy is cut. I think he's going to be a phenomenal player, and I think he could be better than Cooper. Kevin White, you'll see it in my mock draft. I compare him as a mix between Odell Beckham and Jordan Matthews. I know that's a weird comparison considering they're all young players, but I love both of those guys. And like I said, I'm just not sold on the Cooper train as far as where I don't think he is that much better than those other 2 guys. And that my guy La'el Collins is going to be hanging around, I think, at that 19-20 pick. So I would love to see that happen there for. So there's just a couple, like a handful of five players or so that I can see Oakland taking there, and with those 2 picks if they can get them. So I guess I'll stay there. I'll stay there in this year, because we're making the playoffs in 2017. Ed Sable passed away yesterday, 98 years old. Obviously, the founder of NFL Films. His son Steve, preceded him in death a few years ago, and I was actually doing another radio show at the time, and I can kind of echo the same statements that I felt like on that day. Is I as a child, with obviously too much time on my hands, all I did was watch NFL films. So, I mean, I have those two men basically to thank for, so much enjoyment from my childhood. And it's a sad that they're both gone now. Obviously, hopefully they are together somewhere. I really don't know what else to say. Obviously, if you're an NFL fan, you know NFL Films and what they did and how they just really were at the forefront of making this, into America's game and really get you so close to the action. It's sad, and I'm glad, they have, obviously, it's not like NFL Films is going to wither away, but just considering what they did, I heard Dan Patrick talking about how there's, actual filmmakers and directors that thank them so much for, being an inspiration to them and teaching them, how to film things and whatnot. And it's certainly a huge loss, but I'm glad their legacy will continue with NFL Films. Any thoughts there on Ed Sable, Nick?
Like you mentioned, there's no way the NFL would be the giant entity it is today without NFL Films' help. That really pushed the football to the forefront in America as far as bringing it making it a lot more accessible to people in the days long before Sunday Ticket was around.
Yeah, most definitely. Now, I guess, excuse me, as I said earlier, this is our final podcast with RotoRob. Didn't know me before this. Rob really was instrumental over the last couple of years in molding me into the writer and the kind of the sports person that I am. So I want to thank Rob, because without him, we would not have this enormous opportunity to reach a wider audience. So I want to say just a huge thank you to Rob. I've already thanked him a number of times, but I want to just say it one more time. Thanks to Mr. RotoRob Blackstein for everything you've done for me over the last couple of years, and I certainly would not be moving on if it wasn't for you. So I owe you a lot, Rob. Any thoughts there, Nick?
I would echo everything you just said. Rob, I would not be anywhere near the writer I am today without all the help you have and giving Josh and I a platform to get our opinions out there. Nothing but gratitude. Thank you so much.
I worked with some great writers, too, at RotoRob, too. The baseball crazy man, Tim McLeod, our former hockey editor, Chris Wassell, who actually gave us the opportunity to be on his blog talk station. So we owe a lot to Chris as well. I didn't have time, and the list would have been taking me 20 minutes to list of all the names that have been on this podcast. But obviously, I want to thank Ken LeBlanc, who filled in as our sit-em and stardom guy and was on the podcast a number of times. V, the Noble One, charged in like Batman every now and then and was on the podcast and helped us out with sit and stardom. A couple reoccurring guests like Luis Tirado Jr., obviously Brandon Berg, first guest ever, was a lot of fun. Howard Bender, Mike Noto, Chris Mitchell, Liz Loza. A lot of these people were just people that come to mind that have been on the podcast more than once. Matthew Weston, another guy down there in Texas, writes for the Texans. So I want to thank just everybody that's ever been on our show, and hopefully, and obviously, I want to thank Dan Hines, who is giving us this opportunity, who's been on the podcast a number of times, and we sort of, I guess, put him under our spell because he thinks we're great and awesome. So that's why we're moving on, Nick. So, again, just want to thank Rob one more time, and I hope you all can listen to us over there at the Dynasty Football Warehouse. So this has been the RotoRob Fantasy Football Weekly Podcast. Thanks again to our great guest, Jamie Plunkett, FrogsOfWar.com, and Matt Brown, LandGrantHolyLand.com. It's been a lot of fun, people. Hopefully your fantasy football season goes wonderful next year as well. Have a great day. Nick, any closing thoughts?
No, but I will see you next week.
All right. Take care.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the RotoRob Fantasy Football Weekly Podcast with Nick. Hail to the Redskins! Wagner, and my dad, Joshua Johnson. This is so much more than a fantasy show.
We didn't let the team go because we were switching our balls.